What's going on, everybody? Hey, Blake, how are you doing? Good to see you.
What's up, man? Good to see you too.
Glad to have you back on the show, man. I had a
Absolutely.
few people reaching out saying they loved, you being on last week. I even heard that you said you had a couple agents reach out after the show last week. So
I
a
did, yeah.
lot
So,
of people getting some good stuff out of your advice. So bringing you back on, man. I love it. Maybe we'll make this a regular thing.
heck yeah, and thanks to all those who reached out and shared your story as well. Really, it was nice to get to know you guys. So, thank you.
Well, how's your week going, Blake?
Obviously, we were. I took off yesterday. I shouldn't say obvious, but I was off with the family doing lots of things. So today is just playing pickup and getting back together with a lot of things. So just trying to kind of tackle all the emails that I've got and all those different things, and kind of recharge the batteries from being full-time dad all weekend and being the fun dad that wants to wrestle with everybody. So anyway, what about you, bud?
Man, oh, I love it. Well, yeah, same here. Kind of took the day yesterday and just did some stuff around the house and just kind of getting organized. But this morning I've already been super productive. I built an IKEA furniture piece, which, as if you know, like that's like 800 pieces to put this
Yeah,
thing together. So I
you need
feel
a
like I
master's
could
degree to do that.
yeah, I could like end my day right now and I would be good to go, that I've been so productive because I've already knocked that out. But
There you go.
so did that and now just getting ready for the call and got some real estate stuff to do this afternoon and yeah, just had a good week though. So it's fun to be back. Glad to be here. Today we're going to be talking all about new agent tips and tricks and kind of things that we wished Blake and myself wished we would have known when we got started in the business. Just some of the
Mhm.
stuff is like super minute details, just like little things like and some are a little bit more like ideas and just kind of a little bit bigger kind of mindset things that we wish we would have done. But yeah, so Blake, are you ready to rock and roll?
I'm ready to go, man. I'm
Uh,
ready to rock.
all right. Well, do you want to present the first one or do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, man. I'll definitely go first.
All right. So what is your first tip?
So I would say first thing that I wish someone would have told me, but I did once I found there was a need for it was identify a support system. That was probably thing you need to know number one, because when if you are getting into real estate or making a career train change into real estate, your first year is really hard. It has a lot of ups and downs, not only financially but emotionally, and so like it's really important that you identify a support system. For me, it was definitely my wife and my family. Being my parents as well as her parents were there. Everyone was lifting me up when I had some hard times, and if it wasn't for my wife, like she literally helped me kind of push through and break through and kind of make some big changes there. So I would say definitely identify a support system and someone who will kind of give you some good advice that doesn't necessarily have to be real estate specific, just someone who's going to lift you up when you have some of those hard calls, or when you lose a deal or a deal falls through or you lose a listing, something like that. So anyway.
Dude, I love that. That is a huge tip. Yeah, I mean, you certainly hit the nail on the head that I mean, there is a lot of ups and downs that come along in the business. And
Yeah.
even like those times when you do feel like, because I talk to agents quite often that are like, I think I've got to get out of the business or I'm thinking about getting out of the business. I'm like, just hang on like a little bit longer. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's literally what a lot of this is, just trying to stick it out and keep going, because eventually, especially if you're putting in the work, like you are bound to figure it out, but if you give up and quit, well then obviously then there's nothing much you can do. But yeah, and then a lot of times those people that are going to be near you, they're either going to be pulling you towards that goal of being a successful real estate agent, or they're going to be pulling you away from it. And so just identifying the people that are in your life that are closest to you,
Yep.
and and just making sure that you have those people, because if you don't, I mean, that's part of the job. I would go find, like, make that a point of your job to find those people that you can confide in,
Hmm.
that you trust, and that are going to give you good advice, or maybe have done what you've already done. Even if it's not in real estate, but just in in some aspect of their life, like they know the struggles of creating like your own business, and can kind of walk and talk you through the different peculiarities of having a business. So
Sure.
I love it. Great first tip. So, and
Yeah,
guys,
right.
if you have any questions while Blake and I are chatting about this stuff, go ahead and just throw them in the comments there. We'll talk about it. But I'm going to jump on to number 2, and these are in no particular order. These are just things that kind of came up to my mind. I know Blake, was thinking about some separately as well. So these are just kind of like what came to our mind. So there's no particular order in any of these. But one of the ones that I thought about as a new agent is I wished that I would have had a calendar booking system, right? And you might be thinking, well, I'm not even that busy yet. I'm just a new agent. Like, I promise you if you have a good system for booking appointments, it's going to make you, number one, look more professional. But number two, what it did for me is I hated saying no to people, right? Like I want to, like, especially clients or potential clients, like I want to always tell them yes. Like, when you're hungry for business, like in the beginning, you always want to say yes. And so the problem with that, and I know we're going to get into this, Blake, as one of the tips, is when you're a real estate agent, you've got to be time blocked. You've got to have, keep a time blocked calendar. You want to try and stay as organized as possible. And one of the things that you really have to manage well is your time. And when you just say yes to people, because, like, let's say you're trying to book a time and they're asking you what's available for them, and you're trying to match that up with what's available for you, a lot of times you'll say yes to things and kind of override other things that were in your schedule already because you want to kind of please them. Whereas, now that I've got a calendar booking system, I literally send the link to somebody and I say, hey, pick a time on here that works for you. So it still sounds very professional and like I'm trying to make, my time available for them. But it's not like one of those things like where they're like, well, can you do, 10 a.m. on Tuesday? I'm like, oh, no, I can't do that. And then they're like, well, can you do 11 on Wednesday? I'm like, oh, no, I can't do that either. That sounds bad. Whereas if you just send them the link and it only shows the times you're available, like, they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm free for this time. And they'll book that time. And then you can stick to all of your time blocks. And so, I use Calendly. I've used Calendly now for years. I actually went back to see how often I use Calendly. Let me show this. This was kind of interesting. Yeah, let's see, share screen.
While you're pulling that up, I would say that Kyle got me on Calendly, and I thought I was organized in my calendar scheduling system. And holy cow, I was not organized until I found that there's a whole nother way to do it. And it couldn't be more true to what you're saying. Like, people just get on and they book a time with you and it works perfectly. So
it does. Yeah. I've had over 650 appointments. Look at this, set through Calendly. That's like 650 times that I did not have to like go through the rigmarole of like, oh, does this work? No, I sent a link, they booked it, it was done. And then also half the time now too is like, I've got links available. You can put them on your business card, you can put them in your email signatures, where literally then people can just book without even you having to even have that discussion, right? Like they just do it and you see it pop up on your calendar, and it's really easy to set up. I've got all these different, appointments that people can potentially schedule. Each one has a different link to it, and they all link back to my personal calendar, which I can manipulate. I can put in there things that I've got going on, so that way they automatically don't show up as available on any of these different calendars. So
I would also say onto that, Kyle, you can also set a reminder email to go out, and then you can ask them to reconfirm as well, and then send up a follow-up thank you. And so you can kind of pre-write those. So that way, I don't want to say it's like a set it and forget it, but it's definitely like a second. It feels like a virtual assistant, like helping you with your meetings and track those things. So definitely some really good things there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We got Alicia. It looks like I'm a new realtor in Connecticut, and she closed her first transactions 4 weeks after. You should be proud of yourself. That is awesome. That is huge. I know. I mean, geez, to be able to sell something and have it close like 4 weeks. I mean, you must have had that thing going like right out of the gate. So congrats. That is huge. I know that definitely helps out to get one under your belt. And so let's see here. We got Maria. She says she just completed her first year with a team. She's had a couple of transactions, 4 leases, 1 buyer, 1 seller that terminated, and 1 referral in another city. Do I still need a mentor? Well, if we're talking, Maria, a couple things. You might be talking about EXP and their actual mentor program. If that is the case, I don't know how they view leases. I know that you need to have 3 completed transactions. And obviously with you having one buyer closing, they would need to have counted those other leases for you to not need to be in the program. And I don't know for sure. So I'd have to, get back to you on that, or you might want to talk with who the person you're considering naming as your sponsor to see about that. But send a message either to myself or your sponsor, and definitely we can look at that. But then also just in general, like if you're thinking about like mentorship, right? Like if you think you may want to work with, a coach or a mentor, I mean, you definitely still seem like you're in the newer stages, 4 leases, a buyer. I think having a mentor just in general is a good idea, right? And so like having somebody that has done what you want to do, and and can give you advice. They don't necessarily need to be like a coach where you're paying monthly fees and all this type of stuff, but just somebody that's either in your brokerage or just somebody that's a peer on social media that you feel like you can get to be pretty close to. You get along, they're willing to help, they've got the time. And yeah, I mean, then have somebody that you can, bounce ideas off of, and having a mentor. So I would definitely say yes to that. But anyways, all right, let's go ahead and jump into it, Blake, unless you wanted to say anything there. Oh, go ahead.
To be honest, that literally is a perfect segue. So thank you, Maria, because like my second point, which would be point number 3, is identifying a role model or a mentor agent. I feel like that was so perfectly timed. So thank you for that. But for me, it was really important to identify somebody who is, okay, this is a person who is where I want to be someday. What are the things that they do really, really well, and what can I learn from them? So they don't have to be identified as a mentor, because for me, where I was at, it was really hard for me to want to go into the mentor program, because they were taking so much of my commission. It was like 18% of the commission for the first few deals, and there was a lot of associated fees. So for me, I was like, whoa, I'm like promising more money and I haven't even made the money yet. So for me, I was identifying role models and then identifying mentors and coaching. So I think it's really important to not only identify that person who your role model is going to be, but going to them with different questions, concerns, complaints, or like situations where you can kind of talk it out and see what they have done in their experience. So I think it's really important to have that person in your life. And so obviously my first two things that I'm suggesting is the support system at home, and then a support system on the professional side, just because you want you want to learn from their experiences, you want to learn from their successes and their failures.
Hey, Blake, while we're still on the topic, she also asks, what's the difference between a mentor and coaching?
Great follow-up question. So for mentors, especially within EXP, so like I myself am a mentor here at EXP, and with mentoring, you pay, let's see, I think it's 20%. Is it 20% of your first 3 deals, your first 3 transactions? So based off your last question, you would need to either have a closed purchase for if you're the buyer, or 2 listings that you've sold to have those things. But in regards to what is mentorship, there's lessons, classes, and different seminars and things that you can attend, and that your mentor will be with you kind of along the way and help you track your progress, and then be there to kind of answer some different questions for you along the way. And it's something that the mentor is getting paid for, so they should be giving you additional time beyond kind of what it is that might be the norm, if you will. So what is the difference between mentoring and coaching? To be honest, I think the words are kind of synonymous, but I think it really depends on the mentor. For myself personally, I take a very educational approach, and like I consider myself like a mentor and a coach at the same time. But if I were to put it down to its most basic words, I would probably say that in this business, mentoring means that you're paying someone for the additional time, effort, energy, and education that you're giving them, whereas coaching might just be hey, let me coach you along the way. I don't know if you would have.
Yeah, I kind of look at it like, I don't know if this is the same thing as what you were saying or not, but the way I look at like mentoring versus coaching is like mentoring is maybe a little bit more loose. Coaching is more like, I don't want to say strict, but it's more like there's a rhythm to it, right? So like if I were to go hire a Tom Ferry coach or go hire a, maps coach or whatever, right? Like usually there's a cadence, like, hey, you're going to meet with this coach once a week or once every 2 weeks, once a month, whatever it is, right? Like you have a cadence typically with coaching. And a lot of times, you're paying, just like if you were a sports team, right? Like, and you were being coached, like you have practices, right? And you go and the coach is showing up. That's how I look at coaching for real estate, at least in the terms that I understand it with. Whereas mentoring is a little bit more loose. And what I mean by that is like, you still may pay for it, and or maybe not. But it's more of like, there may not be a cadence of like, all right, well, I meet with my mentor, every single week. I meet with them when I need them, or like if a question comes up or whatever. Now, there's obviously, like we said, the terms can be synonymous because you may have a mentor and maybe they say, hey, I want to meet with you every single week. And it's kind of like coaching. So, I mean, they can be one and the same, but in general, that's kind of how I look at the difference between mentoring and coaching. So I hope that helps out. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the next one, which I wished that I knew when I was a newer agent, which is scheduling tours and the timing of it all, right? So I don't know how many new agents on here have not necessarily a fear, but they just, they wonder how this stuff works. Like, let's say you get your first couple clients and they're like, man, I want to go look at 5 properties. These are the ones, that I want to go see. And you're like, whoa, okay, so let me set this up. Like, how do I set it up properly? Like, what's the best way to go about doing it? And now obviously every market's a little bit different because you may be in like a more rural environment where like you might be driving 30 minutes, between properties. You might be in a more urban area where you can cover, properties 5 minutes down the road. You have to kind of, number one, kind of the way that I do it is I take inventory of all the properties they want to see, and I put them on a map, right? And so you can do this on Google Maps. You can also, depending on your scheduling software, like within your MLS, the reason I'm not going to do this like specifically for mine is because I know all the MLSs are a little bit different. So like mine would help me, mainly people in San Antonio, but I'll just tell people in general how I do it. Is if you, number one, have an MLS that you can kind of put all the property addresses in there and have them map it, which that's what mine does. I would do that. If you don't have that ability, or if maybe it's too obscure, you can't figure it out how to do it in your MLS, go on Google Maps and just get really familiar with Google Maps. You can create your own maps, put in all the addresses and see them pinpointed on there. And so from there, I just look at it and I see how close, properties are, or how far apart they are. And I also look at like, what's the most convenient route to take. And in general, the way that I normally do it, if the properties are relatively close to each other, which a lot of times when I'm showing properties in San Antonio, they are, within similar batches of areas. I usually, what I'll do is I will set up for 60-minute appointments. So, that doesn't mean I'm going to be there for 60 minutes, but that's just my time block. But a lot of times, depending on some properties too, you may have to do it 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Some you can do up to 2 hours, but you have to look at that. But what I'll do is I'll start with like the first one. And let's say I'm going to show the first one at 12. That's what time I'm meeting my clients. I'll usually set it for 15 minutes before at 11:45. So I can show up first, get the lights turned on, like get everything ready, right? For like when I meet my client for the first time. Maybe it's the first time I've ever met my client there. Maybe it's just, the first time that day, but I always like to get there, get prepared, make sure that at least the first lockbox was open properly. Right. And so I set up for 15 minutes before. And then I usually assume that we're going to be at the properties for about 15 to 20 minutes apiece. And I do try and set expectations with clients, that, hey, we can always come back to another, to a property that you like the most, but because, we're seeing 7 homes today or 5 homes today or 9 homes, whatever it is, if you're seeing a bunch of homes, I usually try and tell them like, hey, we're going to try and, go through these homes, somewhat quickly. And then the ones that, if we want to see it more in detail, we can come back to it at another time or whatever. And so I try to set expectations just so we can kind of keep a pace for the day. But then what I normally will do is I just try and assume that each property, even though it's about 15 to 20 minutes, I try and set up my time blocks about 30 minutes apart. So if the first one was 11:45 to 12:45, I'll set the next one from 12:15 to 1:15, and then 12:45 to 1:45. And then, and then after 3 properties, I normally at that point will skip about 30 minutes ahead. So The first 3, I'll skip 15 minutes apart. And then after 3, I skip 30 minutes ahead. I think I might've said 30 minutes ahead when I first started, but it's 15 and then 30 after 3. So that way, on average, it's about 20 minutes apart. I know that's really confusing, but let me cover it again real quick. So the first one is 11:45 to 12:45. Second one would be 12 to 1. Third one is 12:15 to 1:15. And then I jump 30 minutes ahead. So then it'd be 12:45 to 1:45, so on and so forth. So if you have like 6 properties to show, you just kind of keep that cadence going. And then sometimes, just depending, again, if your clients are like taking longer at a property or whatever, I do have centralized showing on kind of speed dial, just to like, hey, I'm sure you've been there, Blake, where it's like, if you know it's going to be, the last 2 or 3 are going to be late, I just call centralized showing and say, hey, I got these 2 properties. I need to move the times, to X, Y, and Z. And usually that's not an issue. But that's how I try and do it. And I mean, I've done as many as like 9, 10, 11 properties, tours in one particular day with one particular client. And then I go out and I do another, 6 or 7 with another client. So it can get kind of hectic, and you want to make sure that you have a system to this, just to kind of keep your head on straight. Right. And then I print out all the MLS sheets. I write at the top of the MLS sheet, what time the showings are at. Yes, I've got, all the apps and stuff on my phone, but I like to have a paper copy of stuff just to have it in case technology is not working. And also just so that way it's like in my car with me, I can quickly glance if I need to. So I do always think that that's kind of a best practice. Print out your MLS sheets, write what time that you're going to be there. Because the one thing you don't want to do is like show up to a property and like be early and the client not expecting it, or you've missed your showing window. And so I always, before I walk through the door, I'm always looking at my paper sheet, making sure that the time it is right now is what time I've set it up for. And then I can go into the property. And so, but like I say, the first 3 properties, I do 15 minutes apart. Then on the 4th property, I skip 30 minutes, and then 15 minutes apart again for the next 3. And then 30 minutes. Now, if again, you're looking at your map and there's one property that's going to be a significant distance away from like all the rest, let's say, it's going to take you 20 or 25 minutes, then you have to adjust accordingly. Maybe you don't skip 15 minutes, maybe you skip 30 minutes, on that particular one, or 45 minutes. But just kind of thinking best practices, how that's going to all work. That's how I do it. Obviously, if it's just 1 or 2 properties, it's a lot easier. But Blake, do you have any kind of different advice when it comes to scheduling of your properties?
So I use Showing Times Cart that I really enjoy, and it kind of does a few of those, some of those same things kind of simultaneously. So I think there's probably a day and a time where we can probably do some extended knowledge on like setting up a Showing Times Cart, and that way it'll kind of, it's probably a longer answer than we want to go into. But I use Showing Times Cart. And also, to piggyback off of what you're saying, why is it that when you go to open a lockbox and you're with a client and they're with you and they're looking over your shoulder, that it never opens?
Exactly.
And then like you get there early and it just was like, oh, it opened like immediately.
Perfectly.
Like, why is that? I don't know why.
I have no clue. Yeah, I know that always happens that way. Yep.
Yeah.
And so, or like it's like raining and nasty out, and those are the ones where like the lockbox is always like on the side of the house through the mud.
Why?
And all, it's always that, right?
Yeah,
and
for real. Yeah, so I would say I probably do have a way to use the Showing Times Cart, but that would be like, I think something we could do, at a later time and show just like a video on how to do it. And not only that, but like you get to look extra professional. Something that I went and had made. So like those who don't know, I used to be a teacher for about 10 years. And so I took something from my teacher days and I put it to my MLS sheets. So I print out 2 MLS sheets. I print out a color version and a black and white version. And so that way I know the color version goes to my clients and all the black and white ones stay with me. And so I like to write the same information on each one. And so I had a stamper made. Let me see if it doesn't blur it out. Put it right in front of my face. I had a stamper made. Okay. And this is the stamper. And so here's what it says. Let me stamp a little Post-it note right now. All right. So it says,
it's blurred.
That's so hard to read.
You're going to have to unblur your background probably for a sec so we can all see the glorious background.
Sure. Oh, the glory of it here. So it says, let me see. All right. Hang on. I'm going to unblur here. And then you get to see my children's mess of what's.
There we go. Roof age, HVAC. Oh man, flood zone, days on market, and notes. Dude, that's super smart.
Why, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and patent this idea to be the Blake Salmon stamper method.
Blake's
Um,
gonna start selling stamps. So if you need to buy one, contact Blake Salmons
I'm
and
your stamp
set
guy.
up
That's me.
business.
So I'm in Charleston, and there's a lot of places here in flood zones, and so like that's something I'm writing on every single one. So I want to make sure that I give that information, the same information every time. So I'm not giving somebody else a different quality of service. So I know on every single one, I need to go and get the quick facts on this sheet. So like here's your one pager of all the good information. I've already looked through the proper disclosure to know the HVAC age, the roof age, days on market. A lot of people want to know, like, hey, do you think we could get this for under what it's listed? And the first thing in my mind is, how many days has it been on? And if I know how many days it's been on while I'm standing there, then I'm more of an educated agent, and I could probably start talking with them or start constructing some things. So I would say, like, the better you prep for all your showings and all the houses you go to, the better an agent you can be for your clients.
I love that, man. As far as like, because obviously MLS sheets are all different. Some, some may have days on market printed on the thing, some may not, some may have different things, but like roof age, stuff like that, that's usually never on there. And so, like, if you just figure out like what are the things that your clients usually want to know that are not on the MLS sheet that you normally always have to kind of go back and look up, have a little stamp and just stamp each page. That way, and then you can write it in there. It looks cool. You could brand it if you wanted to. You can do whatever you want, right? It's all
Definitely
those
could.
little differences. So talking about hacks, dude, that's a great little hack. I like it.
Thanks,
Very
man.
nice.
I
Very
didn't even
nice.
think about that. So,
All right, you're
all
up.
right, so I'm up. All right, so I'd say the next one, and I was totally against this. So when I say this, I'm saying this as a very humbled Blake. Okay, my mentors and people who were kind of giving me advice were saying, find someone that you can role play with and script practice. And redo my immediate face when someone told me that. It was like this. Script practice? Like, I don't need to script practice. Like, I thought I was above it, if you will, right? And so, like, I'm saying to you now, I was not above it. And here's why. Like, yes, I'm good at communicating with people. However, when it comes to real estate questions, I didn't want to, when someone asked me a question, be like, that's a great question. So versus having something ready to go on deck because I've practiced it with somebody and then fine-tuned every single word. So like someone hit me with this ton of bricks and they said, listen, you've actually been script practicing for your entire life. You just have no idea that what you're saying is a script. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, I'm going to tell you the most simple script that everyone says. Are you ready? It's 3 words. Are you ready?
Yes.
I love you.
Yep.
You've been script practicing with your mom and dad, with any potential past girlfriends or boyfriends, with your spouse, and you've been saying I love you for so long that this is a script that is ingrained in your mind. So how easy is it for you to say I love you when your spouse or significant other is saying it to you? It comes out as simple as breathing. And so like that is the type of script you want to start to memorize. So like if somebody asks you a question, you don't want to stumble over it. You want to be able to spout it off and make it sound natural. And then when you can get really good at it is when you can put your own twist on it. So like for me and my brand, I like to be funny and I like to use a lot of analogies. So I like to think of different ways that, I can kind of associate real estate with their area or their knowledge. So I like to kind of put it in terms that they understand. So I would say script practice, role play with people. And I would say identify 2 different people you can script practice with. Somebody who's on your same level of experience, someone who's new, brand new, a year in, and then someone who's ahead of you in experience. So that way you can learn what they're saying and how you can improve your script. So like kind of pick up 2 different script partners, and they don't have to be in the same office. They don't have to be in the same city or the same state. Get on some of these Facebook groups and say, I'm looking for a script partner in a different city, because that person could turn into a referral partner. Just saying.
Yep. Yep. I love that. Yeah. Well, and then the other cool thing about it too is like, I mean, you don't have to always think up too, like, what are all the scripts I need to know? Like you can take these from like everyday practice, everyday life, like, especially when you have 1 or 2 other partners. Like what you can do is like whenever your script calls are or whatever, just like that week, you say, hey, this came up in a scenario this week. Like, how would you guys handle this? Right? Like it'd be the same question you would ask a mentor or coach, but now you have a role play partner that you can actually ask their advice, or maybe they don't know either. So you can have like live time just to figure it out. Like, hey, if this was, what would be the best way? And then y'all talk about it. And then even just having talked about it, and having some kind of a, of an answer with it, the next time it comes up, which I promise you, a lot of these questions, you're going to hear them multiple times. And so if you're a new agent, it's not like this is going to be the only time, that you'll hear that. And so it's not worth practicing. It'll be worth practicing, because I promise you, most of the stuff is always going to be kind of the same thing, right? So like, I mean, just some examples, as far as like, if you go to a listing appointment, people are going to say like, can you reduce your commission? You're going to get people that say like, why should I list with you? Or why should I buy a home from you? Like, all of these example scenarios are all great things just to have something ready to go. And it's good to have a script partner so you can see how they say it too, because they might have a little bit of a different twist to it. So I love it. Yep. That'd be a great video for us to make too, Blake, as far as like a little script practice and, talking about different ways that we say things.
Absolutely. Because you can literally just change one word and it changes the meaning of things. So like one thing I changed was, like, if I'm calling you, Kyle, and let's say you've registered on my website to look at houses in Charleston, and I'm like, hey, Kyle, is now a good time to talk? I feel like that's a very common saying, right?
Yeah.
But what do you want to, what's the easiest answer that people are going to naturally say is no.
No, I was
Right?
just saying,
So, like, is it a good time to talk? Well,
not
no,
right
it's not.
now.
Oh,
Yep.
well, okay. I just totally shot myself in the foot. Thanks, bye.
Yep.
Right. But like, if I just change one word, if I say like, hey, Kyle, is now a bad time to talk? I'm giving you the chance to say the answer, what you want to say, which is
no.
no. That's what you want to say, but it's a positive no for me. Oh, great.
Right.
I'm glad we have a few minutes.
Yeah.
So like, all I did was change one word from good to bad.
Yep. That's so smart. I love that. All these little tricks of the trade, man. I love it. I love it.
I know. Little
Very
things.
cool. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. And so this one, again, Blake and I were talking about this one earlier on. This might be location specific, depending on how your MLSs are set up and whatnot. But I remembered earlier on, I used to be so into like just checking my MLS for properties. And I thought that was the end all be all of where all the properties lived. Well, if you're in a market, especially like, I'm in San Antonio, you may have multiple MLSs that kind of cover, still a fairly large territory, but there's crossover. And if you're just looking in your MLS, or if you're just setting up your saved search alerts within your MLS, you could be missing potential opportunity for your clients, or you might not be looking as good as you should when clients are finding properties that you did not, right? And so one of the things, that I got really, more familiar with using was NAR's, the National Association of Realtors Realtor Property Resource. I used that. I used Realtor.com. I've used Zillow.com as well. And now, of course, within my brokerage, we have access to KV Core. And so I can use that as an IDX. Now, the only thing about that, though, it depends on, of course, which MLS you're set up with. Like within mine, I've actually signed up for multiple MLSs, so I can use it still the way that I need to. But what I mean by this is, like, let's take, for instance, San Antonio. Well, within San Antonio, there's good chance that if a house is listed in San Antonio, it's going to be in the San Antonio Board of Realtors. However, let's say, Austin is an hour away from me. I also have, Central Texas MLS, which is kind of covering like the hill country, which is like on the outskirts of San Antonio. And so, you may have properties where they're kind of on the border. You might be looking to search where it might be on like, in between. Or you may have an agent who is only, in the Austin Board of Realtors. They're not part of SABOR because they don't pay the dues, but they get a San Antonio listing. And so they list it in ABOR. And it's not going to show up in the San Antonio Board of Realtors, right? But it's going to show up on Zillow. It's going to show up on Realtor.com because they're syndicating multiple MLSs. And in the beginning, I didn't really understand how all of that worked, like the syndication and, all of this type of stuff. I just looked at my MLS. And so there would be a lot of times where clients were finding properties. I'm like, it's not showing up in my MLS. But then I'd go on Zillow where they sent me the link from. I'm like, oh, yeah, I see it, and I'd have to like do some tracking. So anyways, just be sure that if you're setting your clients up on a saved search, that you have it set up, where you can do it, where it's intaking multiple MLSs. If you're experiencing that type of situation in your area, you may, like, I know Blake, he was mentioning like that probably doesn't come up very often in his market. But you may want to just make sure, talk to some other realtor friends that have been in the business a little bit longer and just kind of ask them how kind of the MLSs all work together in your area. So anyways, I don't know, Blake, if you have any follow-up or anything to add to that, but.
I I would say it's really important, I think, for me to kind of talk to my clients and find out how they're looking for, houses. Like I feel like everybody is so easy just to jump on Realtor.com or Zillow, right? So like
Mhm.
that, they have a really user friendly app. So like I want to look in places that they're not looking. So I would just say like, what is most comfortable for you guys? Are you guys using my website? Are you guys using Zillow, Realtor? Because like if what you're using, I want to use different modality and then look above and below your price points and look at other things. So I'm more or less just like, I want to look in the places where you're not looking so that way I can deliver as much value as I can to my clients.
I love that. And that's the other thing too that I've learned over the years is when you get like, a criteria of what your clients are looking for, especially if they're kind of like the hard to please clients, like they want everything, my mom would always say they've got like champagne taste on a beer budget, right?
Yeah.
Like you probably heard that. Right? So you got those
Oh,
kind of
definitely.
clients. And and basically for me, what it was that like I would do just like you said, right? Like I would say, hey, I understand what you're looking for, and I will try and send you those properties, but I'm also going to send you a couple other things that maybe don't exactly fit your criteria one way or the other. But I think it's best to be open-minded and be willing to go see some different things, because a lot of times when you take clients to the physical properties versus just like trying to show them stuff like through pictures and listings online, the properties can speak to clients differently, and a lot of times they'll be willing to budge on things that they may not have been willing to budge on paper or like what they told you. And so and especially in this market, that's when there's tough to find listings, or it's tough to win listings. You got to have a willingness to maybe see some things a little bit different, go further than they location wise than they were thinking, and say, hey, I get it, I know this isn't your exact area, but let's just go take a look, like X, Y, and Z. Let's just see how it goes. You got to try and push clients a little bit past just the exact specifications that they want, because if you do that, you just kind of box yourself into like, I'm only going to show them what they tell me, then it's going to be very difficult a lot of times. But you got to make sure though too that you're prefacing it, and you're not just like, because then if you're just showing them random stuff and you haven't set that expectation up front, then they're going to think like, well, he's not listening to me or she's not listening to me, and you don't want that either. So just make sure though that you're kind of towing that line as best as you can.
Exactly. And I think, like it depends on who the client is that you're working with as well, right? So I had a first time home buyer and they really wanted, like, I think it was like exact number of square footage. And I was like, hey, that's great. I'm glad that you know what you want, but I found a property and it was like 75 square feet shy of what it was. And I had to kind of really talk her into just going and looking at it. And once we went over and looked at it, there was not one question about square footage. She loved it, loved location, everything about it. She's like, you are so right. This is perfect for me. We ended up buying on it. It was a perfect condo for her. But you have to really kind of help your clients see some things, and really things look differently on in person than they do on paper on the internet. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can pretty much say like every house that I lived in, even the one that I'm in today, on paper wasn't what I was looking for. But because I'm an agent, I just like to go see properties anyways. I'm in the house now, right? And I've been in each house ever since. And so it's just how it
Yeah,
is, right? And so
it's
like
how it is. Yeah,
if I'm susceptible to it, I guarantee clients and stuff like that, are in the same boat. So
absolutely.
anyways, yep, cool. What's the next one, Blake?
So for me, I would say if you're a new agent and let's say you're freshly into real estate, or you're into real estate 1 year, and let's say you have less than, I would say, like somewhere between 6 and 10 transactions, I would say one of the things that I would say to myself, if I could reach back in time, is I would say, man, you'd be looking for buyers to work with. And here's why: because it costs less money to represent yourself, represent whatever it is you stand for, when you get a listing. So like, for example, let's say I pick up a new buyer and they sign paperwork to work with me, and then I start showing them property. Well, I don't need to have, let's say, my brand name figured out just yet. I don't even need my yard signs that say like Blake Salmon Real Estate, or like Aloha Charleston, or whatever my brand was going to be. I didn't need all of those things, like a lockbox. Like you have to invest in a lot of things when you're doing listings, which is a great expense to have. However, if you don't have the experience just yet, you should be looking for buyers and you should be learning how to talk to buyers. Okay. So like when you're brand new to this business, you need to be looking for those buyers and then learning some of the keywords to work with buyers and kind of connecting to them on an emotional standpoint, because buyers are emotional people. It's an emotionally driven purchase, you know? So like when you walk into a house and you're like, I feel like this one's the one. Well, like, tell me why it feels that way. Ask more follow-up questions and different things like that. So I would say, if you're new, be looking for buyers, and then be talking to your fellow realtors about some of the things they do differently when they're working with buyers. That way you can set yourself apart and be different from the next person.
I love it. I love it. Very cool. Well, let's jump over. Well, my next one's a real short one, real quick. But this was always something that like I had like a little like goodie bag of things that I would bring with me. I could just have it in my car all the time. And so I don't know, you might have even some stuff, Blake, that you bring with you, but like, one of the things that your clients are going to need randomly and they're not going to have with them usually is a tape measurer, right? Especially if they like actually end up liking the property and they want to start like measuring rooms or, spaces and just kind of seeing how things work. It's always handy to have a tape measure, with you that you can provide to your clients. Of course, nowadays, I mean, of course you can use your phone and kind of do it, but it's not as accurate. And obviously, it's nice just to have that tape measure. I'd always bring an extra umbrella. So I'd have an umbrella for me and an extra umbrella for my clients. A lot of times if they were riding with me or whatever, even if they weren't, I would just have one just to be able to give if I wanted to. Refreshments and snacks, like, trust me, clients love it if you've got extra snacks, especially if they have kids and stuff. And like, you might save the day if like they don't have the snacks, or if, they ate through all their snacks, or they don't have a drink or whatever. Of course you can stop. I've done that too, where I'm like, hey, if I can tell you're getting hungry, or, I can tell, if we're thirsty or whatever, like we can go to the corner store between our next showing, grab some snacks. But a lot of times I would just bring my own stuff, have my own snacks, my own waters, that type of stuff. And so that was always like, with me in my car. I would pre-pack that stuff. I don't know, Blake, do you have any things that you bring with you consistently?
I have a showings little thing that I take with me all the time. It's a little, I don't know, clipboard that has some storage inside of it. I'd say the only thing, just things to write, with highlighters, pencils, pens, stuff like that. But I actually moved away from the tape measure and went to an electronic tape measure, and
Nice.
that is a great
Next
entertainment
level.
tool
Yep.
for
For
well,
kids.
it's tiny, they're like this big,
Yep.
but when there's kids that join you on the showings, you can
Oh
always
yeah.
say like, hey, can you like measure the room for me, and it entertains them for a long
I love
time.
it.
And it's like helpful, if you will. So that's probably the only thing that I have that you didn't mention.
There you go. Good. I like that one. All right, cool. Any what's your next tip, Blake?
Lead generation. I'd say like you kind of have to try a plethora of things till you find out what your niche is really going to be, whether it's going to be open houses, phone calls, farming, email, letters, or social media, or working your sphere. And there's probably more that I'm not even touching upon right now, but I think just kind of listening to other people and mirroring kind of like what they're doing and trying to do it in a different way, but finding out what is going to be your, I would say, like, someone told me that you need three things, like three different ways that you're pulling in leads. And so for me personally, I utilize my sphere of influence, I utilize social media, and my website. Those are like my three that I really dive into. So I would say finding out what you're really good at, and then trying to be different from the next person. So like I would say find out what it is you're going to do to discover new leads.
I love it. That goes perfect with John Domino's question here. He says 100% of his success is with friends, family, and next door neighbors. How can I expand my horizons and still be successful? So that definitely ties into your question there. I would say, so I agree with what you said, Blake. Have kind of those three pillars of your business. But then as far as like the how side of it goes, I think you have to, number one, John, like look at like, what are your strengths and what do you like to do, right? Because like the way that you might do it is going to be different than the way I might do it, or different way than Blake would do it. But like, what are you into? Like, are you a techie guy? Do you, like social media? Do you dislike social media? Do you like video? Do you dislike video? Do you like cold calling? Do you dislike cold calling? Like, what are some of the things? Do you like to be belly to belly with people? Do you like to be behind a computer screen, kind of lead generating that way? There's all sorts of different methods and ways that you can go beyond your friends, family, and next door neighbors. I mean, Google pay-per-click, if you've got money. If you don't have money, then you wouldn't be Google pay-per-click, right? Like, so like all these different variables that go into that equation that will dictate like the other way to do it. But what I will say on the house side of it is I would advise not to do like the shotgun approach where it's like, well, I want to go beyond these, friends, family, and whatnot. So then I'm going to try, Google pay-per-click a little bit. I'm going to try open houses a little bit. I'm going to try cold calling a little bit. I'm going to try, going to networking events a little bit. Like that usually kind of will set you up for failure, and you'll think like none of that stuff will work. Whereas if you can kind of just say, all right, look, I'm already good with friends, family, and next door neighbors. Like that's going to pay, my bills. That's going to, take care of me to some extent. It doesn't hit all of my goals, but to hit my next goal, I'm going to focus this whole next quarter on perfecting, Google pay-per-click and my systems built around that. Or I'm going to attend every networking event, and I'm going to, try and make this, I'm going to, get names into my database. I'm going to follow up and, build a business from that. Or I'm going to start doing open houses to the max. And I'm going to, but that's what my thing would be to you, John, is like, hey, what are your strengths and all this kind of stuff? And then pick one thing, out of all the thousands or maybe hundreds of different ways you can lead generate, and go all into it for at least like a quarter, and really give it its shot and see if it's cracked up for you, right, and your strengths and what you want to do. But definitely pick something that you like, that you enjoy, that gives you energy, doesn't just suck it away, that you get happy doing, and let that be that other kind of pillar of your business. All right.
Great advice.
All right. Well, let's jump into the next one. This is an app. I know everybody likes apps, so I'm going to provide an app that has served me well. I've had it maybe the last 4 or 5 years. I wished that I had it 15 years ago when I don't even know if the iPhone, I don't think the iPhone was even out when I first started in real estate. It was like the iPhone 3G or whatever was just coming out. But yeah, I wish
we had the Razor.
Yeah, I did actually have one of those suckers. Yeah, the Razor. I still remember that, man. Oh yeah, Motorola, right?
Oh yeah.
The Motorola Razor. Yeah, and yeah. So I think, but this app, man, like I would have this app like as one of like on my home screen, the first screen available. I'm going to show it to you here. It's the Fidelity Agent One app, and here's the interesting thing. I'm pretty sure you can get this regardless of your location. I actually looked it up, Blake, for you. Like, for instance, here, when you go to the top there, like I've got it for Houston, which I'm not in Houston. That's all that was available. Like I've got Texas. And then when I click on that, it only gives me Dallas and Houston. So I just got it as Houston, and you select an office. I just selected a random one. But if I go up here, it only has North Carolina. There's no South Carolina for you, Blake. So I don't know what that's all about, but I'm pretty sure it'll still work. You just may have to like manually input like your tax information. Because I think it's like pulling tax data and stuff. That's why it's like,
sure, that makes sense.
Areas. But the cool thing about this app is I'll show you some of the benefits of this here. So let me go over here. So right now I'm on buyer. So like, let's say that we were buying a house, and I'm going to go ahead and add in my house. Here we go. Put that in there, and we'll say the home price. So it's already pulling in my taxes. Let's say I was going to buy it for 800,000, right? And I'm going to put 10% down. Here's that, all that compute. There we go. It's asking me suggested. So the estimate of what they think is, but then I can go off the recorded tax. So I'll select that one. Now, there we go. It gives me my monthly payment. It gives me what I'll need for cash to close, right? So I can see, down payment, prepaids, fixed expenses. It gives me my monthly payment broken down into principal and interest, taxes, insurance, PMI. And then what you can even do is you can go to Smart Compare up on the top left, and it's going to compare different options, right? So I can see here, that's what the normal conventional loan that I had set up was 30 years, 10% down with that rate. But if I put 20% down, this is what my payment would be. If I did a 15-year note, that is what my payment would be right there. I can slide back over. I can go to the detailed closing costs, and it breaks all of my closing costs down here, kind of itemized. And if you know that some of these are different for your market, you can hit the edit button and change any of these and set it as a template for you. So that way, of course, the next time you do this, you don't have to change them, one by one. But a good practice would be for you to get with either your preferred lender or get with a preferred title company of yours, and just, make sure you square up on the numbers one time, because you just do it once and you'll be good to go. Or if you closed a deal recently, you can grab the closing disclosure and, look at the numbers on there. And then also loan details. You can of course see all of the different loan details here, as far as, like amortization schedule, how much you're paying in interest, all of that good stuff, right? So that's on the buy side. Now on the sell side, like let's say I was going to sell a home, and I'm going to sell a property. Let's say my property, and we were going to sell it for $800,000, right? So I'll say done, grab the taxes, $800,000. I have my broker fee in there. You can put in repairs. It's pulling the property taxes. My loan balance, let's say I owe still $450,000 on the property, have closing date, and I hit compute. Now it's telling me, all right, well, this is my net at close based off of, those details, prorated taxes, closing costs, the balance of my loan. And then there you go. And then you can, same thing, go to detailed closing costs, and it's going to itemize things there for you. And of course you can edit that and change that if you need as well, just to get a nice little breakdown there, which is really cool. And then you can even, if in the top right, see a little arrow up there, you can send this as a report, save it as an estimate, do all sorts of different things with it, text a snapshot.
And that's cool.
So it's really, really helpful. And so then from here too, up on the top left, you see it says net sheet, multiple offers. So if you have multiple offers, you can go ahead and throw in different offers that you got, and then say add offer to do another one and another one and another one. And then it'll make a nice little net or a nice little multiple offer spreadsheet for your clients to look at. Holding costs. This is a cool one. If you're trying to get like a price reduction on the property from your seller, you can say, look, this is how much you're paying in holding costs. Should the property go out, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, all that kind of stuff. And you say, look, you're going to spend an extra $13,000. Like, why don't we just drop the price, 10 grand right now and get this thing sold, or 5 grand right now and get this thing sold. Right. So that's kind of a little cool hack. And then calculators, there's all sorts of extra little calculators built into this. Rent versus buy, sell to net, which is like if they tell you, hey, I need to net $100,000. Well, instead of you messing with the seller net calculator, just go to sell to net, put $100,000, put in the other parameters, and it's going to tell you what you would need to sell that property for to get that price. So all sorts of extra little calculators in there. The premium version, which I don't even have the premium version. Actually, it's not even showing it here. I think I just pulled it up a second ago, but it's super cheap. It's like $10 for the whole year to give you the premium version of it. And when you get the premium version, it gives you all sorts of extra stuff. Like you can post a lot of extra things to social media. So I don't use all that, but I mean, if you wanted it, like infographics, you can see them all down here. You can use these and post them to your social media as branded for you for $10 a year. So it's a lot cheaper than like Keeping Current Matters and, Coffee and Contracts, all that kind of stuff. So anyways, that's a little cool little program there. Yeah. And
Nice.
that was my next hack. So, all right, you're up, Blake.
I've only got one left, and I would say
I only got one left too.
Yes, it's like we planned this.
I
So I would say it really comes down to I think this is kind of a two-parter, but like there are days when you're a new agent, and I can remember my wife asking me like, "Hey, what's your schedule like today?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like my schedule wasn't filled that day because I was hoping to have like buyer consultations or showings or like please a listing, but like I didn't. So like instead of just sitting around waiting for something to happen, I would go out and do something about it. Now, like, can I just go out and start farming, like in pulling leads left and right on like a Tuesday? Not necessarily, but what I can do is I can schedule several showings in my area that I'm that I want to sell in. Not only go look at these houses, so like I can go in there and get a feel of the market, so I can see, that way I'm start to developing like a mindset of this is what a 3-bedroom 2-bath house costs that has this much square footage in my area. So that way, all right, I'm going to go look at 3-bedroom 2-bath houses in this area, start to develop kind of exactly like what the market is telling you as far as price goes. So that way, when you bump into some random stranger in Starbucks and they're like getting the same latte you are, and be like, oh, somehow you get into a conversation, they say, what's like a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house going for? Right. And then you're like, oh, you know what's so funny? I just like went and looked at one just the other day, and like now you're not lying. Right. But also let's double in this. So like let's make sure that you're getting extra exposure. Like go in there. Like take a Facebook live video, take several videos when you're on a reel, or make a reel while you're in there, post. And then when you go in there, you can post several pictures grab several pictures of the property, reach out to the listing agent and say, hey, would you mind if I shared this and I'll tag you in it, or give you credit in there for your listing. But now you're filling your empty schedule, not only with market knowledge, but you're putting out to the world, to all of your friends, family, and network, that like, hey, he's busy, he's showing things, he's doing things. And like, it's not a lie, you're doing market research, but now you're showing people what's going on, what you're doing, that's setting yourself different. And for, again, going back to how I did things, like I was trying to do it in a humorous way, so I always wanted to try and make people laugh and make them watch the whole video. So if you are a realtor and you're watching this far into this video that we're on right now, and you have something that you do differently when you're filling your schedule, send me a Facebook message. Look up Blake Sammons, or go to Instagram and write, to Aloha Charleston. That's my profile there. Let me know what you do differently, so that way maybe I can add some things into my repertoire of things to add in there.
I love it. Yeah, no, it's like the whole thing, I don't necessarily like the term when people say fake it till you make it. I like more of the term act as if, right? Like, so I always think in those terms, like I act as if I've got this or that, right? And you basically, are doing things not to like, make people deceive people or anything, but you
Correct,
truly are, one, conducting market research. Number two, you do have an audience, and you never know when you post something that somebody doesn't come out and say, hey, you know what? I actually really like that property. Can you give me more details about it? Or like and it might not even be somebody, right? Like it might be like, hey, my coworker was just telling me like they were looking for a house in this area, and that house that you just, took a video of looks like it'd be perfect for them. Right? Like you just never know how those things happen. But that is usually how those things do tend to happen, right? It's always like some random story. And, but if you're not doing anything, if you're just like, oh, like waiting for business, none of that stuff will ever come up. And so,
exactly.
Yep. So act as if. I love it. Act as if you've got a buyer, act as if whatever, right? Like, so
well, then it gives you time to practice too, right? Because like we were talking about fumbling with the lockbox earlier, like then you can go and fumble with the lockbox when you're by yourself and learn how to do it in the most proficient way.
For sure. All right. My last tip, and then we'll call it quits, is number one, or not number one, I don't know, number 10 or whatever this is, to track activity, not just the results. So in the beginning, I was real focused with like, all right, how many homes am I going to sell this year? Like, what is my GCI, goal going to be? And I would track, I have like spreadsheets and like little like visuals that I would have on the wall that I would track. Like whenever I would close a home, I'd mark it off, and like, all these things that was like, all right, when I hit my goal or when I do this, I would track it. But I didn't track for the longest time, like my activity, which honestly now looking back, I'm like, that is more important to track your activity than to track like what happens at the end. Right. And so I ended up following a deal called the Greatness Tracker, which is something I got from Core Coaching. And when I got on the Greatness Tracker, like things started just changing in my business. I was tracking like my phone calls, that I was making every single week. I track how many appointments that I go on, which could be, like coffee appointments. It could be actual listing presentations, buyer presentations. I was tracking how many thank you notes that I send. I would track, anything, like any kind of thing that's part of your business plan, or like that you're doing in a daily, on a daily basis or weekly basis, you want to track it, right? And so I would track those types of things, and I still do track them now. It's just, the things that I do today look a little bit different, but I track my actual activity versus just my results. And then it also just gave me like quick wins. Like, it's kind of like having a to-do list and you get to like cross things off. Like, I just liked that feeling of like, all right, like I've got to, do this, do that. Right. And I was just tracking all of the activity, and it made me really feel productive, at the end of the week, because I think the hardest thing is like when you go a week or maybe you go a month and it's like, well, I haven't gotten a client, or I haven't gotten, I didn't get a closing this month. Like that can happen to the best of agents, right? But if you know that you're taking the actions that are going to result in those, and you're consistent with it, you're tracking it, and you know what you're doing, the results will come, right? It's the agents that they don't track the activity, and like they overthink that they're doing all of this activity when in actuality they're really not, but they're not tracking it, so they don't know, but they're like, oh, but I'm productive, I'm doing this and that. And it's like, no, you actually aren't. Like if you tracked like what you do on a daily basis, you're probably wasting a lot of time, right? Like, just random stuff, right? Like that we think we're busy, but then you're not. And so when you track your activity, like the numbers don't lie, and you really have to account for them. And so that way it holds you accountable, right? And so
Yeah.
just tracking activity, not just the results, I think is another one. So very cool. Somebody liked your stamp idea, Blake. Look at YWZ, great tips. Love the stamp idea. And that was awesome. Fidelity app. Awesome. Well, guys, if you're watching this, give it a thumbs up, this video, and put in the comments what your favorite tip was from the day. What the one maybe either is your favorite or that you need to go in and act right away that you want to make use of. So, but that being said, guys, I really appreciate it. I know we're at the end of the hour. Blake, is there anything you want to share or anything before we sign off?
I think I would also like to say, if anybody who's watching, like, you comment down there on if there's anything you want us to expand on as well. I think there's a few things there where we could expand, but just out of curiosity, like if other people have other things that they would suggest, I'd be curious to see how we could expand this list a little bit more. So feedback is good, and yeah, let me know. I'll start to coin that stamp and sell the Blake Salmon stamper method.
I love it. I love it. Well, and then next week, tune in. We're going to be talking why 87% of all agents fail in real estate. I know we've all heard that statistic, right? And so we're going to be going over some of the kind of mistakes, or just, the main things that agents kind of, might fumble up, or, or they just lack, that if you knew about, it would help you to, prolong your career as a real estate agent, which, as we said in the earlier part of the video, that is, half the battle is just, keeping going. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and just some common pitfalls and mistakes agents might make that that you can try and hopefully avoid. So thanks again, guys. Appreciate all your time, and we will see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.